In 2023, the CEO of the world's largest chemical company made a decision. He was moving 10 billion euros to China. 2,600 jobs gone. A site his company had operated at for 158 years was shrinking permanently by design. He didn't apologize. He didn't hedge. He said Germany left him no choice. His name was Martin Brudermüller, and this is how that decision was made. There's a city in southwest Germany called Ludwigshafen. It sits on the Rhine, just across from Mannheim, and for 150 years, it has been home to one thing, BASF, the world's largest chemical company. 39,000 workers, 200 interconnected plants on one single site, 2 square kilometers of pipes and reactors, and storage tanks, producing chemicals used in almost everything you own. For 150 years, Ludwigshafen and BASF were the same story. And then in 2023, the man running BASF, a chemist named Martin Brudermüller, who spent his entire career inside this one company, inside this one city, stood up and said something that no CEO of a company this size has ever said out loud. He said Germany is no longer competitive for energy-intensive industry permanently.
Companies, the outlook on their future financials and competitiveness has changed. Moving towards net zero has become even more difficult for our industry. We as an industry are essential with our products for a successful transformation of society and the industrial ecosystem. However, at the same time, we are remaining highly dependent on fossil raw materials and energy, and thus extremely challenged.
And then he announced BASF's biggest investment in its 158-year history, 10 billion euros, not in Germany, in China. This is not a metaphor. I'm going to show you exactly how Europe's green ambition is dismantling its entire industrial base it spent 70 years building, and why the man running Europe's most important factory just gave up on it. To understand why Brudermüller's decision matters, you need to understand what he built. BASF's Ludwigshafen site isn't a factory. It's a system. 200 individual plants, all connected, feeding each other's waste as raw materials. The exhaust from one plant becomes the feedstock for the next. Heat generated in one reactor gets captured and used in another. Brudermüller calls it Verbund, German for network. It is the most energy-efficient industrial complex ever designed. The engineering is genuinely extraordinary. But here's the thing no one talks about. The network only works. The whole elegant system only functions if energy is cheap. For decades, that energy came from Russia. 50 to 20 euros per megawatt hour. Reliable, abundant, and basically free by industrial standards. And BASF wasn't alone. Germany built its entire economy on this foundation. Steel, chemicals, automobile, machines, precision manufacturing. Industry represented 23% of German GDP, double that of America, triple the UK's. Germany's 3 million small and medium-sized manufacturers grew up orbiting these industrial giants, specialized firms making components, tools, and materials that feed the anchor. One bearing manufacturer in Mannheim, 80 employees, ran 60% of its revenue through Ludwigshafen's logistics. When BASF cut off its Verbund expansion, they cut 3 shifts. Nobody reported it. It didn't make the news. It never does. All of it, every part of it, built on one assumption: cheap energy. Brudermüller knew this better than anyone else. He spent 30 years engineering BASF's system around it. The Verbund was his life's work. The assumption was his foundation. And that assumption broke. Europe's green transition didn't happen overnight. It was built through the 2010s. Carbon pricing under the EU emissions trading system, renewable targets, coal phase-out.
Move towards zero emissions, everybody will have to do their part. There's no such thing as states' goals. Everybody has their parts in it, local governments, and finally everybody who's living in these houses.
Brudermüller was watching all of it. He wasn't opposed to the climate goals. He said publicly multiple times that BASF took decarbonization seriously.
We have ambitious CO2 targets, and they are clear to everybody in BASF. We want to become climate neutral by 2050, and by 2030, we want to reduce our emissions by 25% compared to 2018.
But he kept raising the questions that Brussels didn't want to answer. What happens to energy-intensive industries during the transition? While renewables scale up, which takes decades, what do the factories run on? Nobody gave him a satisfying answer, because there wasn't one. And then came 2022, Russia-Ukraine war. EU cut its Russian gas supply. The assumption that had underpinned Europe's industry for 40 years evaporated in weeks. Gas prices didn't double, it peaked. They went 5 times higher. Electricity prices across Germany hit levels that made production in certain sectors not difficult, but uneconomical. The math stopped working. Brother Muller's January 2023 electric bill compared to his January 2021 electric bill was unrecognizable. And here's where he did something unusual. He broke the corporate silence. In an interview, he said what most executives say in private. He called Germany's energy crisis a permanent problem, not a temporary one. He said the transition timeline had no basis in industrial reality. He said flatly that Germany had made itself uncompetitive for energy-intensive production. He wasn't venting. He had already made his decision. Bruder Muller had been saying this for 2 years. The calls, the shareholder meetings, the Financial Times. Nobody moved. So he did. BASF announced it would permanently downsize its operation in Ludwigshafen. Not pause, not restructure, permanently shrink. 2,600 jobs, billions in assets written down. The 150-year-old home base made smaller by design for good. In that same period, BASF confirmed its Zhanjiang investment, 10 billion euros, a full Vermont complex, the same concept as Ludwigshafen built from scratch, on the coast of southern China. BASF's largest single capital investment in its entire 158-year history. The company that has been in Germany since 1865, that survived 2 world wars and reunification, chose to build its future in China. Not expand there, build its future there. But why China? Because energy in China costs a fraction of what it does in Germany. There is no carbon price in Chinese industrial production. The government actively subsidizes imports. The math works in Zhanjiang. It stopped working in Ludwigshafen. And here's the part that makes Europe's green policy look almost absurd. BASF's production doesn't disappear when it leaves Ludwigshafen. The chemical still gets made. The carbon still gets emitted. It just happens in China now, where it doesn't appear in Europe's ledger. Europe's emissions fall, but global emissions don't move. The industry just left, and Europe's outsourcing the pollution. Bruder Muller wasn't alone. German firms like ThyssenKrupp and Covestro are restructuring, reducing, and redirecting investments away from Germany. BASF was the first to say it out loud. The others followed quietly. When the most committed industrial company in Europe's most industrial country makes this call, it sends a signal to every CFO on the continent about where the rational decision points. There is a version of this story where energy prices eventually come down, enough renewable capacity gets built, and Europe's industry comes back. Bruder Muller was asked this directly. Could BASF return to Ludwigshafen if the energy situation improved? His answer was careful and devastating. He said, the ecosystem has changed. You cannot simply rebuild what took decades to create. Here's what he means. The Zhanjiang complex is under construction. By the time it reaches full capacity, the engineering team will have transferred there. The supply chains will have reorganized around it. The knowledge of how to run a chemical Verbund will have moved. And the small German suppliers who are orbiting Ludwigshafen for 150 years, they don't get a press conference. They just quietly lose their largest customer. Some restructure, some close. The ecosystem begins to unravel, not in headlines, but in quarterly reports nobody reads. This is what politicians consistently underestimate about industrial ecosystems. You cannot write a subsidy check. You cannot buy 30 years of compounding network effects. You cannot legislate a supplier cluster back into existence once it disappears. The investment signal is not permanent. No company is going to build a new energy-intensive facility in Europe at 3 to 4 times the US and Chinese energy cost. Capital flows to where the math works, which right now means North America and Asia. And here's the deepest irony of all. Europe needs the chemical industry to build the green ecosystem it chose. Solar panels, wind turbines, batteries. All of them require specialized chemicals. Chemicals that BASF makes. But BASF is leaving. And this is the green paradox. And nobody in Brussels is talking about it. Step back from the economy for a moment. Think about what Brother Muller actually did. He is not a climate denier. He is not a political actor. He is a chemist who spent 30 years building the most important factory in Europe. He wanted to stay. His workers are in Ludwigshafen. His career is in Ludwigshafen. BASF's identity is in Ludwigshafen. He looked at the numbers anyway. And the numbers said, Germany was finished for this kind of industry. A Europe that loses its industrial base doesn't just lose jobs. It loses strategical autonomy. It becomes dependent on Chinese manufactured goods, on American security, on imports for the very material it needs to build its green future. The green transition and the deindustrialization are not two separate stories happening in parallel. They are the same story. The energy costs required to accelerate the transition are the same costs that are deindustrializing Europe. Europe chose the climate ambition. The factories are choosing somewhere else. Both choices are rational. They are just not compatible, not yet. Not with the current technology, not at this speed. The Verbund is still running in Ludwigshafen. The pipes still carry chemicals, but the expansion plans are cancelled. The next generation of engineers are heading to Zhangjiang. The man who built this place, who knows every corner of it, signed the orders himself. This is not pessimism. This is not politics. This is just math. And when the man who had the most to lose by admitting it tells you the math doesn't work anymore, you should believe him.